Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to today's class on information security. This is going to be broadcast on Swayam Prabha channel 16. My name is Dr. Sudhendra Hanumantarao. I'm the Dean of Faculty of Management and Commerce at Manipal University in Jaipur. In today's session, we will look at the idea of what do we mean by information security, the importance of information security for both us and companies in today's world, the basic foundations of information security and the concepts involved. We'll take a little bit of the jargon and the language used in this field. We'll also look at various tools and techniques that are used in developing an information security architecture. We will look at various players involved from different domains, which together form this concept called information security. And finally, we'll close out with a couple of certifications that those interested can take and acquire to enhance their knowledge and their employability. Let me go ahead and share my desktop. So this course, as I mentioned, is on the basics of information security. And the approach that is being taken today to provide information security is to provide security in a set of layers. That is, there are different layers of security, physical, software, hardware, and things like that. And if someone breaches one layer, there is the next layer to protect our information. And this to delve a little bit into history, information security is a relatively new phenomenon, at least as a discipline. Historically, information was in the form of physical documents or in some physical form, which was difficult to distribute but easy to secure. However, today, much of our information is in a digital form and it travels all over in the internet. So while distribution has become easier, it also has become much more difficult to secure our information. And all of us deal with an information system for various aspects of our life, whether we are placing an order for groceries, making a money transfer, downloading and watching a video, or sharing a message or a photo with our family members, sending an email to a colleague, or sending a document. Everything is in the form of digitized information. So it's as easy as it is to distribute that. As it travels, it becomes fairly easy for third parties to steal this information, change that information, and use it for illegal and not legal purposes. So it's all the more secure and important for us that we secure our information. This is even more important for companies because the various tools that companies need to run their businesses, run their operations, is in the form of digitized information. It could be financial information, it could be operational information, it could be marketing information, or even more importantly, a key asset that all organizations have is their intellectual capital, IP. That again is in the form of digitized information. So it becomes, if this information is stolen or compromised, a company's operations and company's health, financial health, operational health, and future could be seriously compromised. So this concept of information security is very critical, both at an individual level and at the level of a corporation or a company. And as I mentioned, even when we had mainframe computers, information predominantly stayed on in our system, in one computer, which we could control. But as it opened up into the internet, it travels all over and we could never be sure where that information is. If, for example, if I go to the web page of a bank, say SBI or HDFC Bank, if I send in my login information, I enter it on my system, ultimately it travels, we don't know through which path, to the servers of the bank itself. So at that point, that information gets stored on the bank. My details of my account, my balance is stored on the bank's server. So when I log in and ask to see my balance, it sends me that information, which again travels through the internet, through various sources, and reaches my desktop or laptop or what have you. So at any of these points, our information may be compromised. It could be stolen. It could be used to make an unauthorized transfer for that matter. Somebody could steal our identity. So the internet has made this task of information security much more critical and more difficult to manage. That's the importance of information security today. The key precept or the key concept, one of the key drivers of information security or information in general is that we need to share information. We need to share our information with somebody else. Somebody else needs to share their information with us. I need to share my details with my bank. The bank has to share the details it has kept in my name with me. At the same time, we should also make sure that only those who are allowed, who need to share, need that information, should be allowed to share it, should be allowed to access it. Anyone else should be stopped from accessing that information. So those who should be allowed should be allowed. Those who should not be allowed should be prevented from accessing that information. And the term information security today involves multiple concepts. It involves concepts from finance. It involves concepts from technology. It involves concepts from mathematics. It involves concepts from business and processes. It involves concepts from law. What if somebody steals the information and misuses that? How do we address that issue? So we have law enforcement. We have auditing. So all these concepts are drawn from different disciplines of business and life and operations, and they're all coalescing. They're all coming together into one single umbrella, under one single umbrella called information security. And lastly, as one of the foundational concepts, as we know, information security has contradictory demands. We need to be able to share information, but not with everyone. We need to make it easy for people to access information. But if we make it easy, people who are not authorized also may access that information. So we should make it sufficiently difficult for others to break in. So again, a contradictory demand. For example, if you do a financial transaction, you want to transfer money to a different party or a different account, we will be asked to log in. We will be asked to enter so many passwords and one-time passwords and things like that. If we ask people to remember too many passwords, they may forget it. They may enter it wrongly. But if we ask them to use less passwords, simpler passwords, then it makes it simple for others to break even. How do we strike a balance between these contradictory demands is one of the key driving features or approaches and challenges in information security. So that is the importance of information security in today's world. Most of our assets are in the form of digitized information. We should be able to share it safely, whether we are a company or an individual or a nation. We should be able to make sure that we share information safely with those who should be allowed to share, and at the same time prevent unauthorized users from accessing our information, compromising our operations, and misusing that information. And as I mentioned, today, most organizations, most sites, most corporations, most governments take a layered approach to information security. There'll be layers and layers and layers of information. We will look at some of those layers later in the lecture. First, let's take a look at what are called the 3 pillars of an information security architecture. If we say we have provided information security, that should ensure us three key things. The first one is, they are known as the 3 pillars of information security and abbreviated as CIA. It stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality refers to that aspect where only those who should be allowed to see that information alone should be able to do that. Anyone else not authorized, who have no need for that information, should not be allowed to see that information, read that information, write that information, use it for anything. So this is the concept of confidentiality. You want to keep the information confidential, make it available to only those who should have it. Second pillar is integrity. Let me take an example. I log into my bank site, say State Bank of India, and say send me my bank balance. Now, when the bank has my balance kept in its computers. It pulls out that number, sends it over the internet to my screen. Integrity refers to that concept where the information I see in my screen is, say, my bank balance is 50,000 rupees. That's the amount sent by the bank. Nobody else has changed it. That information as sent to the bank has reached me without being changed. And even within the bank, I need to be certain that this balance is only changed either by me or by some authorized person. For example, if somebody unauthorizedly gets access to my account and changes the balance from 50,000 to 25,000 rupees and transfers 25,000 to some other illegal account, then the integrity is compromised. Because as per me, I have deposited 50,000 rupees. The bank has made an entry saying that there is 50,000 rupees in my account, but somebody else has broken in and changed that amount into something else. At this point, we say the integrity of the system is not safe. So integrity means any information sent and stored is as it should be, and any change that is being made to that information is made through proper authorized channels or authorized parties. Anything other than that, if there is a change made unauthorizedly by non-authorized parties, then we would say the integrity is compromised. If the information in transmission from the sender to the receiver has been intercepted and changed, again we say the integrity of that information, let that be a bank balance, about a email, about a movie, whatever, we say the integrity has been compromised. So any secure information security architecture should ensure that information, as we see, is what it is supposed to be. It has not been changed in any unauthorized or illegal manner. The third pillar of information security is availability. That is, information should be there when we need it. Many times, say one big e-commerce company announces a big sale. So we try to log into that site, we try to access that site, the site is not accessible. It may say server is down. So this is compromising the third aspect of information security. When the company announced that we are going to have a big sale and put up a website with that information of all the items on sale, the purpose will not be served if that information is not available to the users. Only then the information is useful. It should be there and it should be available when we need it. If availability is compromised, if the site crashes or there are various ways to make that site non-accessible, then we say availability is compromised. So these are the three pillars of information security. Information should be kept confidential, accessible by only those who should be. All the information we see is what is authorized. Any change that has been made to that information is authorized and can be traced down to who made that change. No illegal or unauthorized changes are made. And third, information is available when we need it. These are the three pillars and form the guiding principles of information security, this concept of CIA. Here is the same thing shown in a graphic form. At the heart of our system, our existence as a corporation, as an individual, is information. The three dimensions of information security are, as we see, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In a layered architecture, these three concepts, the information security encompassing these three dimensions, is ensured at multiple levels. It's ensured at the level of hardware. It's ensured at the level of software. It's ensured at the level of communications through which we send and receive information in the internet world today. It is implemented and ensured at the level of products, which may cover physical security, or products which cover software and hardware security. It's ensured by making sure that people security is ensured, that people don't get unauthorized access and compromise information. At the same time, those who need to make the change are allowed to make the change safely, and their security is ensured. And if all else is at the organization level, we also have policies and procedures which say who should access this information, in what form, what are the uses that this information can be put to. So that's the last layer. If any of this is compromised, we can find out that if somebody has broken a policy, somebody might have unauthorizedly copied a file, which software might have failed in detecting, hardware might have failed in detecting, communications and other layers might have failed in detecting. But when we find out, we should have a policy to make sure that somebody has broken this policy and we can take action. And after all this, there is the outside world too. If we know that some person or some employee has hacked into our site, stolen credit card information and put it to misuse, or done compromise somebody's privacy, then we should be able to, at the last stage, after everything is done, you have failed in everything else, we should be able to take recourse to the law enforcement agencies, who should be able to ensure that the mistake has been set right and penal action is taken. That's in the outside environment. Within the organization, these are the layers in which we can implement various aspects of information security. That's at hardware, software, communication, physical security, training people how to safely use information, laying down policies and procedures as to who can use, what can be done with that information, and what happens if that information is misused. Let me give one small example in terms of training people. If between two shifts, somebody has worked on the system in one shift, he or she has changed the password. And for the next person who comes for the next shift, there may be a temptation to write that password on a post-it note, put it on the terminal, so that when the person comes for the next shift, he can access the password very easily. It's right there available. But this would be a serious breach of security, because not just that person, if somebody else comes to that room, sees the computer, they should be able to steal the password. So this is how we train people, to make sure that they learn how to use the system safely. If we change the password, we send that person an SMS, not put it on a sticky note. When we leave the room, we make sure that we close and lock the door to the computers. These are the ways we can train people. And likewise, there are similar measures we can take at different levels to make sure that different layers of security holds up. That is, if somebody is able to break into the room, they have breached physical security, then next step they should be confronted by being unable to break into the software. The software will ask for their login. If somebody able to logs in, we should be able to make sure that the hardware finds and locks down the system. So different layers, we can ensure protection for our information. So this is another graphic or a slide which has laid down the various securities in more detail. This flows from these layers of security. It flows from this concept of what is called defense in depth. In some of our traditional stories from Panchatantra and things like that, we might have heard of a 7-layered fort. Again, from defense, from military. What's the idea? If somebody breaches through one layer of the fort, they have to breach through the next layer of the fort. So it's not easy that if they break one layer of the fort, they should be able to walk in. They have to make it difficult by having layers and layers. So reaching the core of the fort, where our assets are, involves breaching through multiple layers, which is far more difficult than breaching through one layer. So we would like to defend our information. We would like to provide security to our information by giving security layers which form depth of security. So these layers, in no particular order, the first layer is physical security. We will look at each of these layers in a little more detail. We need to provide security at the physical layer, and we need to provide security at what's called a perimeter, the boundary of our system, not just physically, our computing system. We need to provide security at the level of controlling the access and managing privileges. Who can log in and what can they do? We need to provide information at the layer of the application itself. My banking application will have its own security measures. My reservation system, reservation application has security on its own level. And also, finally, when we send information out of our system, whether it's my desktop, laptop, smartphone, or a tab, when I say enter my password, login and password, click. Essentially, we are sending that information out to the server, which is sitting at the site of the bank or the airline company or what have you. It goes to the internet. It goes through what is called a transport layer. We need to secure information when the information is transiting from my system to the server. And there are two related concepts. One is, what happens if, despite all these measures of security, it still gets breached? A virus gets through, a hacker gets through, somebody compromises our system. We notice that a virus has attacked our system. Then we say a security event has happened. It was designed to operate without any problem. Now the problem has happened. We say security event has happened. How do we manage that security? So there's a whole discipline called security event management. What are the punitive actions we take to compensate and block intruders and things like that. And finally, the outside world in the form of various regulatory bodies, the government, and the law enforcement mechanism, they have laid down various policies. For example, the Reserve Bank of India says that if you are putting up a banking site to do internet banking, these are the levels of protection you need to provide. These are the various measures you have to take to ensure that your customers' information is safe, privacy is not breached. So adhering to those rules is called compliance. We need to make sure only when we show to the Reserve Bank that we have provided these layers of security and we have met the standards mandated by the Reserve Bank, then only then will RBI let us conduct our banking on the internet. This aspect is called compliance. We are complying with the rules laid down by the Reserve Bank of India. Likewise, we need to comply with rules laid down by various bodies, not just nationally, internationally also. The International Telecommunication Union has its own policies. If we need to transmit information, they say you need to follow these policies and procedures to comply with. Likewise, ISO has laid certain standards for information security. So when we follow those security, then we can say we are in compliance with the ISO 20000 series about information security. So compliance is another key aspect of forming a security architecture. And of course, we do have people who evaluate our compliance. Somebody can come to our site, do all their testing and make sure and certify that we are in compliance with the ISO standard so and so, that we are in compliance with RBI guidelines on internet banking. So these are the key layers and that are involved in providing a security architecture. Let's look at them one by one. The first layer is physical security. This refers to providing proper sensing, proper fencing to our the information center, providing proper access. If you have stored computer in a central location, we need to make sure that the access to that is controlled. People just can't walk in. We may ask them to enter their ID password or flash that card. You may know that some of the IT companies and their data centers, you need to have an access card. You need to flash that card. Only when it matches does it let you in. We need to make sure that doors are securely closed. When we have 4 doors, all of which have proper physical security put in, so that somebody cannot just walk in and steal our data. The easiest way to steal our data is to physically carry it away. So we have done that, but then we have an entry to the bathroom or something which is not guarded, which leads to the hallway. That is a good example of physical security may be breached. Or we have put all these measures, we lock the doors or we have these cards to provide access. When somebody goes out, just out of sheer lethargy, just to, instead of flashing the card, they open the door, put a stopper like a pot or something, keep it open by the time they go get some coffee and come back. This would be a breach of physical security. These are all measures. So these are all aspects which go into providing physical security to the data center. It sometimes also includes making sure that somebody does not come and damage our system. As we see, it's not just that people need to steal the information. If they just make it unavailable, the availability aspect, it still compromises our security. So part of physical security is also to make sure that somebody cannot come and physically damage our system. Like they cannot come and cut the wires and make our server go down. They cannot come and disable the AC so that systems will shut down. So measures like these, or what if there is a fire? How do we control the fire so that our systems are not damaged? Measures like this form what is called physical security. And once physical security is taken care of, that is, once somebody passes through all the system, they have gained access to where our computers are. Then the next step is providing what is called perimeter security. The security as somebody enters into the system. This for people typically takes the form of their asking for their ID control, asking for their ID and password, so that we make sure that when somebody logs into our system, logs into an application, goes into the banking software. They have proved what they are. This also comes under the next layer called access control. Perimeter security involves much more than that. As I mentioned, much of our information is traveling over the internet. So part of the information is meant for within use of our company. But much of the information, people are trying to send information to us through our servers. Like when I ask the bank for my account balance, the bank sends me that information. It is trying to enter into my system and display it here. If that's all there was, life would have been easy. But that's not all the things that are trying to enter our system. There may be viruses trying to enter into our system. This is very important both at our individual computers level or at the company level. Somebody may have let loose a virus which may enter our company computers and bring them to a standstill. Somebody might be trying to break into the system, what we call as intruding into the system, to steal information. Somebody might be trying to break into our system, company system, to put in some malware, which is a piece of software which does damage or simply steals information. So there is a lot of, it's not just useful information or information that we have asked for, which will be trying to enter into our system, whether it's be my personal computer here or my computer at my organization. Lot of malicious, bad types of information also are trying to enter into our system. Once they enter into our system, they can cause havoc because they have already breached a critical level. So providing security at that level at the very entry level itself, so that they cannot breach and enter into our system, is called perimeter security. That is, at the border, we have put measures to make sure that anybody or any piece of information just cannot enter. We will make sure that only useful information which you have asked for is entered into our system. Any harmful piece of data, program, software, information is blocked right at the entry point. Most commonly, this takes the form of a firewall. It's only the first measure. There are many other measures which go into providing perimeter security. The most common method is providing a firewall. That is, every piece of information, even if it's somebody's ID password, their bank account number, and anything which is coming to our system, inside our system, to access information on our computers, they are stopped by a firewall and inspected. That firewall stops every piece of information based on a set of rules we have defined earlier. It tries to judge whether this is a useful piece of information, safe piece of information or not. Then let's only that piece of information which is safe and what we have asked for, warranted, and blocks everything else. This is one layer of perimeter security. There are many other measures like looking for intrusion detection. We can look for to see if somebody, one single piece of information, one piece that has come to us may seem harmless, but put together, if 12 of such pieces join together, once they get into the system, if they may join together and do some damage, or 12 different pieces, somebody smart may send us a virus in 12 different pieces. Once they enter our system, each individual piece may look innocuous and innocent, but once enter into our system, those 12 pieces can join together and form a virus which will damage us. So somebody is trying to intrude into our system, steal information. Somebody might be trying to guess the passwords. So these firewalls, and there is software which can detect such attempts, that somebody is trying to guess our password. Somebody is trying to send us pieces of information, which when put together causes big damage. So we have tools and techniques to detect intrusion detection, to detect intrusion and block that. There may be attempts by somebody who sends us a lot of requests. You know, our computers, as powerful as they are, they can only serve a limited number of users, maybe 10,000 users, 20,000 users. Beyond that, systems may stop functioning. They may even crash. So somebody may deliberately try to send requests. It's fairly easy today with all those network computers, which will bombard our systems, which may appear like the requests are coming from 1 million users. Instead of getting 10,000 users for whom we have defined our system, somebody may try to bombard it to make it appear as if requests are coming from 1 million users, which may simply block our system. So we have tools to detect that somebody is trying to do what is called a denial of service attack. By requesting all the resources themselves, they are forcing us to deny services to actual useful users. Denial of service attack. We have tools to detect that somebody is trying to bombard us, bring our system to a standstill so that we cannot serve anyone else. So we detect that and block all the communication coming from that user so that we can avoid denial of service attacks. So concepts like this, firewall, intrusion detection, protection against denial of service, these are all attempts to stop any attack against our system right at the boundary before they even enter our system. These concepts are loosely termed under perimeter security. Once somebody passes through this, somebody passes through the physical security aspect, somebody passes through it looks like a valid user or a valid piece of information. Some user is trying to, for a bank, a customer seems to be accessing the bank site to get his or her information. Then we really need to make sure that that person is whom they claim to be. If I am Sudhendra Hanumantarao, I need to prove to my bank that when I enter, I am Sudhendra Hanumantarao, so I should be allowed, and more importantly, I should be allowed to use only my information. I should be allowed to change the balances between my accounts only. I should not be allowed to look at somebody else's account, or I should not be allowed to change somebody else's account. On the other hand, if I'm a manager of the bank and I am trying to access the bank site to take care of some business, I might have approved a loan, I need to approve that. I may have to approve a change in balance of some customer. Then if I am a manager, this system should make sure that I am indeed that person and I am indeed the manager. Hence, I should be allowed to look at the balances of other customers. If necessary, do the applicate change or sanction a loan, or in general, do my activities as a manager. So these two concepts, making sure we are whom we claim to be, and we are allowed to access what we are based on our position. This comes under the concept of access control and privilege management. There is a third aspect related called identity management. We'll not get into that in this class. So access control essentially says it's like that security man at the gate or your gate pass. He asks you for the pass. If you show the pass or show your ID card, the security person looks at the ID card, looks at the number, looks at you, make sure that you are you. He makes sure that my photo is there in my ID card. He sees that. Many times they enter into a system which matches my photo there. Then they let me in. The first aspect of letting a person in by making sure that they are who they are is called access control. We control access to authorized people only. It's like a security guard. And it's a little more nuanced than firewall. Firewall simply says if it's a valid piece of information or not. Access control verifies that we are who we are. Most of us, this takes the form of a ID and a password. You go to any of your sites, even go to some of the e-commerce sites. You go to the railway reservation system, IRCTC, go to your banking site. First thing you are asked is ID and password. So together, ID is something which says who you are. Password is something only you are supposed to know. So ID says I'm claiming to be Sudhendra Hanumantarao. When I enter the password, the system has a copy of my password. The system knows that only I know the password. I have not given out my password to anyone. So when I enter my name and enter my password, it could also take the form of a PIN, a QR code, or sometimes a fingerprint, biometrics, or iris scan. Together, they tell the system that yes, this person entering, his name is Sudhendra Hanumantarao, and he is that person because only he knows the password, which nobody else is supposed to know, or only his fingerprint, which nobody else has, which matches our system. And once I enter, my privileges need to be managed. That is, if I enter as a customer, I should only be allowed to look at my accounts and do all the activities to my accounts. If on the other hand, if I am both an account holder and a guardian, sometimes we open accounts in the name of children. So in that case, what should I be allowed? I should be allowed to look at and do activities with my account. I should also be able to look at activities and details of my accounts which are belong to my charges. If I open an account in the name of my son, my minor son, I should be able to do activities on that activity also, but nobody else. If I am a manager, I should be allowed to look at maybe balances of other users. And maybe I should be allowed to sanction loans worth say 1 lakh. On the other hand, if I'm a general manager, if I'm a manager, I cannot sanction a loan more than 1 lakh. If the loan has to be sanctioned, I need to send it to my general manager. So general manager might be allowed to sanction loans up to 10 lakhs. Whereas a manager is simply allowed to look at accounts, sanctions loans up to 1 lakh. A general manager has a higher privilege of sanctioning loans worth much more than a simple manager. So this concept of letting people do what they're authorized to do is called privileges, or managing their privileges. And sometimes it can get quite complex. For example, the general manager may go on leave, and this manager may be temporarily elevated into become a general manager. So for that period, this manager may have the privileges of sanctioning loans up to 10 lakhs. Once the general manager comes back to work after the leave period, then the rights may have to get reverted. So that this manager goes back to sanctioning loans 1 lakh, and the general manager is allowed to sanction loans up to 10 lakhs. So once we have, at this stage, we have gotten into the system and the application, and we have shown that we are whom we claim to be, and we are allowed to do certain activities. We have certain privileges. We are allowed to do those privileges. Certain times, smart users, hackers, might bypass this. They may break in access through various forms, through exploiting loopholes within the application itself, or they may simply steal somebody's ID password. And if they get that, and if they get access to the application itself, that is the banking application, we have entered in a protected form. The moment I have proven that I'm a valid user, it puts boundaries around me and allows me what to do. Some hacker might be able to compromise that and get in onto the system to either damage the system itself. They may change the programs. They simply corrupt the data. Or more damagingly, they might be able to get into the application, get into the database, and steal account balances, steal account numbers, steal credit card numbers. You know, many times we see, for example, a few years back, there was an attack on the site of the famous electronic company Sony. When somebody attacked that site, the hackers, they didn't damage the system, but they stole credit card numbers. So this has gone beyond, they have gone through physical security, they have gone through perimeter security, they have gone through access control, they have broken through all those. They have broken through the application and gotten into the data. So to prevent such attacks or such possibilities, security needs to be provided at the level of application also. When somebody may break through all this, but when they try to authorize the database and change data, there will be protection to make sure that we detect that somebody is trying to attack our database and block it. We can find out there are various types of application breaches. For those who are technologically inclined, you may look at something called buffer overflow, for example, or SQL injection. There are various types in which hackers might be able to attack our application or attack our databases. So we need to make built-in protection so that somebody cannot use buffer overflow. Somebody will not be able to do SQL injection to steal data from our database. So this layer of security where somebody is breached into the application itself, trying to break the application or the data, the measures put in to protect against us. In case of internet sites, it's called CSS attacks, cross-site scripting attacks. Measures taken to stop or block such attacks are what are called application security. So we have put in security so that people cannot physically access and steal information. We have put security at the boundary of our entire IT infrastructure, our information system, so that we try to stop all attacks and intruders right at the gates when they allowed. But at the same time, remember, we need to allow users, actual valid users, to be able to access the system and do their activities. So we do that by means of access control while blocking everyone else. Somebody may be smart enough to break through all this, get into the application to steal data. So we'll take measures at application security level to block that. And after all this, we still have to send information outside. A company may have to send information to another company or a user. My bank, it has all the security measures. It has a firewall, intrusion detection system, all the protection against application level. After all that, when it sends me my account balance, it has to send it through the internet, which is not in its control, nor in my control. So when the information about my account balance is coming from the bank's side to my laptop here, it's going all through the internet, and internet doesn't have a fixed path. It may go through anywhere in the world. So while it is coming through the internet, somebody might be able to steal that. Somebody may be able to stop that information, steal it and use it for something else, change the balance to me. So it looks different to me and they are using it for something else. So when the information is going through various forms on the internet, it will go through our routers. You might have heard of like your Wi-Fi router. It may go from Wi-Fi router to the internet service provider. From there, it may go to the telephone company through optical cable, through optical cables. It may cross over to other continents if my bank is in a different continent and go through another router there. At all these states, information can be stolen and misused. So it has to be protected. And when it is transiting over the internet, that layer is called transport layer security. So these are some of the key layers. So if somebody is able to breach through one layer, we try to block them at the next layer, so that breaking and stealing and compromising information is not that easy. So this is the layered approach to security. You breach through one layer, we have different layers. Security at different layers. So you breach through one, you have to run through. You will run through a set of obstacles in breaching through the next layer. The various concepts, people keep hearing all these terms. Some of these terms I'll try to explain now. Authentication. Somebody says you're not authenticated. Authentication means proving what we claim who we are. That is, if I enter my ID and password, it proves to the system that I am Surendra Hanumantrao because I have my login ID and I also have a password which only I have, nobody else. So if password is entered correctly, the system understands that I am Surendra Hanumantrao. So this is known as authenticating myself. I am authenticating to the system. Sometimes it may take the form of a card and a pin. We enter our card, enter a pin. I am supposed to have the card and only I am supposed to know the pin. When I do both, it tells the bank that I am the person whom I claim to be. So I am authenticating myself. The associated concept is authorization. Once I enter as a customer, what am I authorized? I'm authorized to look at my accounts and my accounts only. My balances changing. I'm not authorized to go look at somebody else's balances. What we are allowed to do once we prove into a system who we are, what we are allowed to do is called authorization. Single sign-on is another concept. Single sign-on, federated authentication, identity management, provisioning, all these are terms which corporations use to make sure that access is as easy as possible to the users, while at the same time, they make sure that users cannot compromise that information. Users cannot claim to be somebody else and cheat the system. Roles management is related to what I mentioned earlier. I'm a manager, but next 3 days, my general manager is away. So for those 3 days, I should be safely allowed to do all the activities that a general manager does. That is sanctions loans worth 10 lakhs. At that time, I'm a manager with the role of a general manager. When my general manager comes back, I'm reverted back. So that this is one simple way how organizations manage. For example, if the general manager is away, is on leave, activities of a bank should not come to a standstill. It never happens. As users, we don't see that. The way banks and organizations manage is using this concept of roles management. Encryption is probably the single most critical element about information security. So we look at a little more detail about encryption. Audit logs is whatever we do in a system, it's all documented. If I go to my bank site, enter my ID password, access my bank account, my savings account balance, transfer X amount of money to some other thing, Every step is noted down in a file. It writes down into a computer file. These are called audit logs. These are a powerful tool for companies and people to find out if something goes wrong. If I complain to the bank that my balance was 50,000, now it is showing 25,000. If I complain, how do they find out what happened? They'll go to the audit logs and check what happened every day. They should be able to come back to me and say, on Monday at 3:35 p.m., you logged in at 3:42. You accessed your savings bank account. At 3:43, here is a record saying that you transferred 25,000 to some other account. So the tool used for such detective activities, for analyzing what has happened, is called audit logs. Data loss prevention is one more tool we have to make sure that information we have stored is not lost or corrupted. Various ways to secure that. So these are some of the terms you might be hearing in this concept of. Other terms we hear, which are fairly common, are like viruses and malware. Virus is any piece of software which gains unauthorized authorization and does typically viruses damage. They corrupt our data or bring the system down. Malware is something more dangerous. It's a piece of software which accesses our system and steals information. Like it may steal all my keyboard, the key presses. Like I might be entering my password. This piece of malware or spyware, sometimes it's also called spyware. It's a piece of software which has come in over the internet and occupied my system. It captures all the things I'm typing. So if I'm entering my ID and password, it captures that information and may transmit that information to somebody sitting there. So somebody has access to my information. So these are all various pieces. Worms are another piece of software like viruses. So these are all various pieces of software which gain unauthorized access to our system through the internet and cause damage, which we didn't intend. I'll skip the next few terminology. I will address hacking, cracking, and impersonation. We keep hearing the term hacking or hackers. Actually, hackers are people. Concept of hacking is anybody who gains unauthorized access to our system as a user. Worms, spyware, malware are all pieces of software. They also gain unauthorized users. Hackers are users who gain unauthorized access to our system and do unauthorized activities using their tools and intelligence. People in the industry differentiate between hackers and crackers. Hackers are people who gain unauthorized access with the intention to check whether your system is safe, and if there is something wrong with your system, with your company site, your company computers, they alert the company saying that there's a breach in your system, plug that. So they are called ethical hackers. One might hear terms like learning ethical hacking. It's an activity. Companies encourage ethical hackers because they show us the weaknesses in our system, but don't do any damage. Hackers which break into a system in the intention of stealing information or causing damage are actually called crackers. In the public mind, when we say hackers, they actually mean crackers. Within the industry, there is a differentiation made between ethical hackers or hackers and crackers. The third one is called impersonation. Somebody may present themselves as somebody else. Somebody may go somehow get my ID password, steal my ID password, and present it in the bank pretending to be me. They may not be able to steal my ID password, but call the bank on the phone line, and they will ask you for your name, date of birth, and all. They may gain authorization. They may somehow get that information, present it, and make it appear as if they're me. They're actually taking my role. That concept, which can be quite dangerous from a security perspective, it's called impersonation. And I'll also look at another term I would like to expand a little is called phishing or social attacks. Somebody, you may get a site, you may get an email saying that your account is about to become inactive. Please click on this to change your ID password. So when you click on that site may look exactly like the site of your bank, but it's actually run by a different unauthorized agency So when you enter your ID password or give your ID password on the phone, somebody may call up and say your account balance is going below the certain limit, or your deadline for some activity is crossing. Please enter your ID password here so that we can go and change. They are doing it to steal your ID and password, which they can use to gain unauthorized access to your information assets and compromise that. This concept of actually not breaking into the system, but through social means, get that information from us, the users, is called phishing. It did happen to me once. I got an email from somebody which said, click here to access your bank account. Your password is about to expire. When I clicked on it, it took me to a site which looked exactly like my banking site. Except when I looked at the URL at the top, it was slightly different. So this was clearly an attempt to make me enter my ID and password to a site which looked like my bank site, but which is actually not my bank. Had I entered my ID and password, they would have taken that and entered into the actual bank using my ID and password and done damage. We also sometimes get emails saying that I am so and so, I have so much money waiting. If you send me so much money, I will take care. Sometimes also. So such attacks also are part of what is called phishing attacks. They try to get your information, trying to be somebody without actually breaking into the system. So these are the various terms. I have listed many more terms here, which are more relevant for technical people, not meant for business graduates. I have only explained the important terms, but be aware that more and more terms are emerging all the time, and you keep hearing these terms. So when you hear a word like virus or a worm or spyware, malware, hacker, snooping, phishing, understand that these are all various terms used in the overall concept, overall umbrella of information security. So next part I would like to address is cryptography. As I said, this is a highly mathematical field, but this is probably the single key element of our information security architecture in the internet world. It forms the theoretical and conceptual foundation of internet security. It enables us to securely transform information. I gave an example of when I send my ID password to the bank over the internet. It should be readable only to the system at the bank or a person at the bank, nobody else. If somebody steals that information, which is possible over the internet, even if they actually steal the information, they should not be able to make sense out of it. They should not be able to, what they see is useless information. So only when I enter or when the bank sends me my account balance, it's in rupees. It says my name, account number and rupees. It should appear as name, account number and rupees only on my system. If somebody in the internet, somebody sitting capturing my router at the ISP, at the banking company or somewhere else, if somebody steals my information, that information should be presented to them in such a way that they cannot read what it is. So it is cryptography which makes sure. It has two concepts, encryption and decryption. This together makes sure that when that information is, when it reaches somebody, when somebody is able to get that information, only authorized people will make sense out of it. The bank makes sense out of it. I make sense out of it. Anybody stealing that information will not make sense out of it. That is ensured by what is called cryptography. As you can see how important it is, because information is traveling all over the time, all over. While in transit, it can be stolen anywhere. It's like putting a lock on our, we are sending a package and sealing it, so that when the seal is broken, if somebody needs to steal, they need to break the seal and steal the contents. When it happens, we know. Or it's more importantly, it's like putting a lock. I'm sending a box to somebody, I have locked it. So anybody who is carrying the box in between, they'll not be able to open it. You need the key. That tool which does seal our information, secures it from unauthorized users, is called cryptography. It has various terms, like what I type, like my ID and password, I enter in plain English, the language I know. It's called plain text. It gets converted into a set of symbols, some gibberish. If you open it, it looks like gibberish. The program which does it is called an algorithm. What results the text is what is called ciphertext. there are things like one-way and two-way encryption. When the bank sends my account number and details, account balances, the bank encrypts it. When it reaches me, I should decrypt it so that I can understand what my account number is and what is the balance. Such a thing is called two-way encryption. It gets encrypted and gets decrypted here. There are certain cases where we encrypt the text, we code the text into something ununderstandable, and we cannot get it back. It is called one-way encryption. Sometimes you may also hear the word hash or hashing. When we say hashing, it is one-way encryption, and we use this algorithm. Say I am entering my account number. I use the algorithm to change it to something else which cannot be readable. So you may say, what is the use? It has certain critical use, especially while storing things like passwords. Things like passwords are typically stored by using one-way encryption. More importantly, in the cryptocurrency world, like Bitcoin and things like that, we will not get into the details of those in this lecture, but this big way in which they store their information, all the cryptocurrencies, is by using one-way encryption or one-way hashing. That is the importance of one-way encryption. Otherwise, most of the encryption is two-way. I encrypt my ID and password, send it to the bank, and the bank decrypts it, gets my ID, gets my password, understands that it is me, I'm asking for my account balance, pulls the accounts balance out of the database, encrypts it and sends it to me. When it reaches my system decrypts it and displays the correct account and current balance. Then there is also things called symmetrical encryption and asymmetrical encryption. It's a fairly involved, mathematically involved concept, but let's understand for the purposes of this lecture, the net effect of symmetrical and asymmetrical encryption is the same. They both ensure that information is encrypted, transferred safely so that anybody stealing will not be able to make sense out of it, and gets decrypted. When you hear the word PKI, that is asymmetrical. Most encryption is symmetrical, but when you hear words like PKI, that is asymmetrical encryption. Algorithm is the program or the mathematical tool which converts what I type into something doesn't make sense, and at the other end converts something that doesn't make sense back into what we can read. So the series of sequential steps, the mathematical steps taken, it's called algorithm. Then we hear about encryption key. An algorithm needs a set of numbers to use as encryption key, so that if I enter my ID password multiple times, each time it results in different end result, different ciphers. That is done for safety reason. That is done using encryption key. So you may hear things like encrypted with 1024-bit encryption, encrypted with 2048-bit encryption. That refers to the length of the key. The general thing is longer the key, generally safer, not always. So that is the importance of encryption. It is used by algorithms. Longer the key, normally it is safer. So the algorithm plus the key ensure that information when it transits is done safely, and somebody, if they steal, they'll not be able to make use of the stolen information. That's why you can see in the era of internet, cryptography is so important, because whenever data transports anywhere, it can be stolen anywhere. Every person who carries our box, when we are transmitting the box through courier, for example, can open the box. They have physical possession of the box. Cryptography is the tool which makes sure that our box of information cannot be opened and read by anyone. So you may also note here the term called SSL or HTTPS. The foundation of SSL is cryptography, which makes sure that what we enter in our browser displays on your browser or wherever else without anyone having been able to touch that information. A lot of work is going on in the area of cryptography. It's a mathematically involved area. A lot of work is going on in building new algorithms, new keys, new methods. And together, cryptography ensures a big component of our information is safe. It is used at layer of physical security, application security, software security, not physical, hardware security, at perimeter security, at transport layer security. many of these layers make use of cryptography to make sure that our information is safely and securely protected and transmitted. So what I have here is typically a 3 layers of information systems today. Most of our applications are stored in 3 layers. The first layer you see, after that stick figure, this layer here is called presentation layer. All our internet sites and all is stored at this layer. The second layer is called the application layer. The actual programs are stored at this layer. The third layer is called the data layer. There's a critical importance why it's arranged in this way. For our lecture today, it's necessary to remember that by separating our infrastructure into 3 layers, we can also provide information between layers of infrastructure itself. The first firewall is actually a firewall and various tools. This is part of a perimeter security. As somebody comes into our system, they have to go through the firewall. When they actually go from this layer to the next layer, application layer, we can put one more firewall or other tools to make sure that if somebody breaches through the first layer, they're not able to, they have to breach through the second layer. And by protecting data, we are providing one more layer of protection. So this is another implementation of the layered approach to information security. Not only do we have different layers in terms of physical layer, software layer, hardware layer, application layer, and things like that, even by dividing our infrastructure into different layers, we can provide protection at between 2 or more layers of our physical infrastructure. Most of our applications today necessarily work with these 3 layers. Let me take the example of that same banking system. Here I am. When I log into their system, when I go to their system, the first page I get, www.sbi.com, www.hdfcbank.com, that information will be stored in the first layer, this layer here. When I send my ID and password, that logic to verify that will be stored in the second layer. Details like my bank account number, my ID and password, the details, the balance are stored in the third layer. Between each layers also we can provide tools for security. These are some of the layers that I covered already. Layer 1 is physical security, which controls physical ingress and egress. Second layer is perimeter security. Third layer is transport layer security, when data is transiting over the wire. Layer 4 is access control and privilege management. Layer 5 is security at the application layer itself. You see much more information here than would be warranted for a lecture like this. These are meant for people who are technically qualified, but we do understand that what is presented today is just the basics. There is much more involved in the whole infrastructure, the edifice, the umbrella, which ensures that our information is safely protected and are made available to use. Let me cover briefly the next 2 aspects of security event management and compliance. As I mentioned earlier, security event is an event which has breached our security. We have put all our layers to make sure that information is safe and secure. What somebody still breaches that? We notice that somebody has attacked our system. So how do we take care? So managing those things to make sure that we limit the damage and restore it back is called security event management. It covers, first thing is keep observing what is happening to our system, see if somebody is trying to attack us. We put observers, software observers at key points. They're called agents which observe all these things. So when something goes wrong, some unnatural traffic is coming, somebody is coming to attack our system, these agents raise an alarm. They say somebody is trying to attack your system. Some virus is coming to system. At that point, we can go back, look at logs, look at what are event managers, analyze patterns, and act, alert and act. Let everyone know. Shut down your system. It's being attacked by a virus. And then take action to block our system and remove the virus. And many times at the corporate level, it is outsourced. This concept is stable, evolving. That is, if an event happens, despite all our efforts, if somebody is still able to breach into our system and try to access and steal our information, how do we notice that? How do we react to that? How do we block that attempt and restore the original state? All these things happen once that event has happened. This whole set of activities, concepts, policies is called security event management. And finally, compliance. We have done all these things. How do we prove to the world? Ultimately, if a customer has no faith in our system, they will not come to the system. They will not give me my credit card number. Only when I tell I'm an e-commerce site, I want you to enter your credit card number before I make the sale, before you place the order. If I don't prove that my system is not safe enough, you as a user, as a buyer, will not feel confident in giving me your credit card number. So one way of doing that is to show that there are standards outside, we adhere to those standards. If we adhere to those standards, my system is safe. So we do that by proving our compliance. So compliance is a must-have for today. There are a number of standards which say, if you follow these standards, your system is safe. So you will hear terms like in the US, what is called SOX, or Sarbanes-Oxley standards. There is something called COBIT, a set of standards developed by an organization called ISACA. They say if you adhere to COBIT standards, your system is very safe. In terms of risk management for banks, there is something called the Basel II standards. Then the ISO 9000 series, we keep seeing like that there is a series of ISO 20000 standards. They lay down various policies to follow to make our system is safe. In addition, in India, the Reserve Bank of India for online banking purposes has laid down its own guidelines. So if we are compliant with RBI guidelines, you can be reasonably assured that my information system is safe. All the transactions you do with me, all the information you send with me is saved and guarded. There are certifications also in this process, which is not important for this class, but you may hear terms like SAS 70 and ISO 20799 or 17799 are all standards of compliance. The key activity here is auditing. How do we show that we are compliant with RBI guidelines? There are IT security auditors whom RBI would have certified. They come audit our site, like auditors audit our financial books. IT auditors audit my site, my processes, and certify that I am in compliance with RBI's guidelines. And today, that's a whole career option for many people becoming IT auditors. And today there are tools which can look at our software and certify whether it meets one of these standards. This mostly auditing is a manual activity, except there are certain tools which can do it for the software part. They can do it automatically and say, this piece of software adheres to RBI guidelines. So compliance is one other aspect of security. It's a set of activities by means of which we show to the world that our systems are safe as guided by so and so. Security event management and compliance are not the technical aspect of information security, but they are a necessary component. And many organizations spend a lot of money on ensuring compliance. For example, about 2 years back, the chairman of JP Morgan Chase, the #1 bank in the US, mentioned that his organization is spending roughly about $4 billion to ensure compliance. It complies with various standards. That is the importance of compliance. It's a costly activity, but without that, we cannot prove that we are safe. And some of the consequences, if we don't protect our information, if we do not ensure the security of information, you can guess what the potential consequences could be. First, there could be direct financial costs. That is, if somebody attacks our system, attacks our financial system, steals money from the bank, they attack our system, transfer money out of our bank from our customers' accounts to their account in some other bank. So there could be financial cost directly. Secondly, in addition to that, so that means we have lost money which we have to make good. In addition to that, somebody breached our system means we might have violated some of the regulations. So regulatory authorities, whether they be RBI or the international banking system or the governments, they may punish us for not saving our information. They punish us by putting sanctions. They may say you will not be allowed to do online business. You will not be allowed to do internet commerce. They may levy fines on us. They may put fees on it. In addition, punitive damages may be levied. That means as a punishment, organizations, they say, not only do you give back your customers money lost, but in addition, we are putting a fine on top. And there is always a risk of bankruptcy. If our information is compromised and people have taken advantage and done actions because of various lawsuits, my company may become bankrupt by not taking care of my information. Even if there is no threat, there is a loss and we have made good the loss, we have survived, there may still be a loss of trust and credibility. I am running an e-commerce site, it is attacked and customers stole credit cards. Would you as a user, would you give your credit card to me again? There's a lot of trust. There is a lot of credibility. It will result in negative publicity, which will reduce my business again. I may lose customers, let alone be facing fines and things like that. More importantly, I may lose my customers' trust and lose business in the process. On top of it, I have taken care of all these things. Still, there's a cost to remediate. I have to make the system secure again. I have to show that my system is secure. I may have to buy new software. I may have to buy new tools. I may have to get it audited. So there is a cost of remediation also. So the consequences of our security, especially at a corporate level, at an individual level, if my security is breached in my laptop, which might mean that I lose my information. Some virus may come and corrupt my files, or somebody may steal money from my accounts. At a corporate level, the consequences can be much more damaging. The whole corporation may go out of business due to these breaches that may happen. There could be much. This is a small set of potential consequences that can happen due to a breach of security. Hence, again, to go back to the original slide, this is the importance of information security today. Why we should pay attention to that, why we should carefully guard the security of our information. To sum up, information security affects all facets and areas of information technology, and more importantly, it affects all facets and areas of business itself. There is increasing awareness. Tools are becoming increasingly sophisticated. Today, a lot of systems are reasonably secure. We can safely use information systems online. Otherwise, it would be practically impossible to do any business. At a time like this was recorded when the whole nation is under quarantine for COVID. In a case like that, the fact that we are able to do some of our work is due to all these online systems running on internet, and we are able to do it safely because of information security that has been provided at various levels. Third, so tools are getting better, awareness is getting better. We can technically make a system as safe as possible. We can block down everything. However, that doesn't serve the purpose. We need to lock the system to such an extent that people are still able to use it. We cannot lock everything out. The key element, remember, not only do we protect the information from unauthorized use, we should allow authorized use also. Otherwise, the concept of security is meaningless. That means we need to let users use the system. Many times users turn out to be the weak link. They may absent-mindedly give their password to somebody. They may write it on a slip of paper, stick it on their laptops. They may give very weak passwords. A password like 11111111, their birthday, things which are easy to guess. So ultimately, training users is a key element of security. Training users to use information, to use information systems, to use the internet in a safe manner is perhaps the most critical aspect of the whole information security as a concept. However strong we make a system, as they say, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. If users are the weak link, system gets compromised. Training, getting good habits, good practices is a critical element. And there's a lot of activity happening in the internet field. It's technical innovation in the term of cryptography, algorithms is happening all the time, but people also are coming up with innovations in the process, the way we use information, the way we guard user information, managing users, training users. A lot of work activity is happening in that area. A lot of work also is happening in ensuring compliance. Standards are coming. How do we audit the systems and make sure that systems comply with those standards? And finally, the cost of failure is increasing. If our system fails, the potential consequences even at our individual level. For example, in case of cryptocurrency, entire cryptocurrencies are in the form of digitized, encrypted pieces of data in our system. Somebody steals, we lose all our currency. It may affect us personally. If we lose all our data on our systems, the consequences could be significant. For corporations and companies, organizations, it can be unimaginable. So that's the importance of, that's the summation of this whole course. I have listed some references that may not be important, but for those who are interested in increasing their knowledge about cryptography and increasing their employability, there are a few certifications which they might avail of. I have listed 2 or 3 in this slide. There is, for technical people, there is a certification called CISSP, Certified Information Security Services Professional. It's provided by an organization called ISC Square. This is a good certification for those who are planning a technical career in the realm of information security. I would leave, for auditors, there is another certification called CISA, Certified Information Security Auditor, conducted by an organization called ISACA. Let me increase the size of the font. That's much better. So there is one more certification called Certified Information Security Auditor. It's conducted by an organization called ISACA. So, and in addition, there are also certifications from various software providers. Like Cisco provides a certification called CCIE, Cisco Certified Internet Network Expert. For those interested in knowing more about this field, increasing their knowledge, get certifications to enhance their employment potential, you may want to look into these different certifications: CISSP, CISA, CCIE Security, and there are similar ones, many more in the market. These are some of the most important ones. That brings us to the end of this first lecture. I hope you have enjoyed this lecture, and this is a vast field, something which, and what we have touched is not even the tip of the iceberg. My idea here is to give an overall idea of what we mean by information security. What is the concept? What is it supposed to ensure? What are the various aspects of it? What are the tools and techniques? What are some of the terms we hear? What are the standards that can be used to measure our system? What are the activities we can do? And finally, get an idea of, if we want to increase our knowledge and increase our employment, what are some of the certifications that we can go for? I hope you enjoyed the lecture. And so for those interested, please do continue with the various aspects that I mentioned out here. There is a lot of literature available out on the internet in the form of books, in the form of lectures, in the form of online courses. Do take advantage of them. Good luck. Thank you.